I would like to read to you tonight from the book of Daniel, chapter 2, verses 14 to 18. Daniel 2, verse 14. Then Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, "Why is the decree so hasty from the king?" Then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time, and that he would show the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went to his house, and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah his companions, that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Just a few thoughts from this passage, brethren. We see from these verses, firstly, a fearful situation. A fearful situation. Because the wise men were unable to reveal not only the facts of King Nebuchadnezzar's dream, but the interpretation of the dream, the king wanted them all dead. We read of that in verse 5 of the chapter. Now, if the decree was carried out, it would almost certainly mean the end of the godly remnant. God, remember, had whittled the remnant down, seemingly to single figures in the time of the exile. And that remnant comprised of, as far as we know, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Those men, as far as we know, were the ones faithful to God in Babylon. If the king had got his way, the true Israel of God would cease to exist. This was a fearful situation for the Church of God. Although the circumstances, of course, are entirely different to that of our own day, I believe we can draw a parallel here, namely that parallel that we live in a spiritual exile. The remnant is very small. The cause is low. Ungodliness abounds. The love of many, even in the church, waxes cold. Are we not in, as we look around us today, in a fearful situation, humanly speaking? So, what do we do when all seems lost? What did Daniel do when all seemed lost? Well, we read in verses 17 and 18, "Then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah his companions, that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon." So the first thing we see is a fearful situation. The second thing we see is fervent intercession. Fervent intercession. 4 men in a house began to pray, and they prayed fervently. One after the other, they prayed, much like tonight. They filled their mouths with arguments, much like tonight. They petitioned the Most High for mercy and grace and for the secret of the dream to be revealed. The weapons of our warfare, brethren, are not carnal, but spiritual. They took up the weapon, that almighty weapon of all prayer, and discharged it accordingly. They fired the promises heavenward by faith into the arms of their intercessor and waited for the blessing. And oh, what a wait that must have been. Well, God graciously heard and answered them. What do we do when the Nebuchadnezzars of this world threaten the church? What do we do when all seems lost and the cause is low? Why, the remnant gets down on its knees, the knees of its soul, and engages God in fervent, united prayer, ultimately rejoicing, as we have already heard tonight, that we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. The third and final thing we see here is a blessed intervention. So we've seen a fearful situation, fervent intercession, and thirdly and finally, a blessed intervention. Verse 19, then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. God intervened. The dream was revealed unto Daniel. And I'm reminded of the words of verse 25. I think it's verse 14. The secret of the Lord is with them that fear him. Notice in this passage how low things got. How low things got. But how quickly God turned it all around. Think of it. Only a few hours earlier, it looked as if the remnant was about to die. But by the end of it, as we read, not only is the remnant preserved, it is promoted. Here's the lesson then of this passage. The remnant did not die because the Lord preserved it, and because in times of crisis, it gave itself wholly to united prayer. That is what to do when all seems lost. I'd like to end with a short quote from the pen of Thomas Watson, one of the Puritans. He puts it like this: when we wonder what God is doing with us and are ready to kill ourselves with care, let us rest in God's wisdom. He knows best what he has to do. God is most in his way when we think he is most out of the way. When we think God's church is, as it were, in the grave, and there is a tombstone laid upon her, his wisdom can roll away the stone of the sepulchre. May the Lord bless his word to us. Amen.